In this episode of DIY Author, independent advisor and content strategist Michael Boezi. I'm Chris Well. Let's start the show. You're an author. Maybe you're taking the traditional route. Maybe you've chosen an independent path. Or maybe you want the best of both worlds. Wherever you want to go as a writer, DIY Author is here to help you on your journey with advice, encouragement, and practical tips. Because do it yourself doesn't have to mean do it alone. Hello and welcome to this episode of DIY Author. I'm your host, Chris Well. Our guest today is Michael Boezi, an independent advisor and content strategist with years of experience working in publishing. He is an author, a blogger, a podcaster, and a musician. Through his company Control Mouse Media, Michael offers his services as an advisor to authors, publishers and content owners, and to entrepreneurs. In this interview, we discuss his Glassbox project, where he is creating a whole book from scratch and showing the entire process from beginning to end. We also talk about the parallels between authors and entrepreneurs, the power of creating content for multiple media, and the value of keeping a schedule. Here's our interview. All right, I'm talking today with Michael Boezi from Control Mouse Media, and also responsible for the Glassbox project, which can be found at glassboxproject.com. Thank you for being with us today, Michael.
Happy to be here, Chris.
So let's start out with the Glassbox project. You are creating a book out in the open so that everybody can watch the whole process. Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, this idea has been percolating for a little while now. I have a pretty extensive amount of publishing experience. I spent about 17 years producing books. I was in the textbook side of the industry, so producing nonfiction, instructional works. And I just felt like I had a lot of expertise to share with authors who are writing nonfiction. And I think of nonfiction in particular as something that's instructive. So I think of folks like that as they're teachers in a way. So they're kind of, I guess it's a way for me to use my experience in helping authors build instructional products and apply it to this. And the thing is, really, I guess the idea that, or the thing that spurred this idea was that, I saw the rules change a lot in publishing, but authors' activities haven't. And they seem to be still sort of following old tropes, and it's harming their chances at success. So I just wanted to help take my expertise and use that to help authors be more successful.
What all will we get to watch as the process unfolds?
Well, basically, in a nutshell, it's about I wanted to expose how I think about running a book project. And that's really soup to nuts, right? So that's, everything from the planning stage, structuring the book, tone, tempo, language, finding your audience, pricing issues, marketing. I mean, basically just how to make the right decisions for your book. And again, it was just sort of applying my expertise from publishing and beyond to sort of show that. And hence the name, Glassbox Project. I sort of intended to do this under glass, as it were.
So is this a book that you were writing specifically for this, or is this a book that you would have written anyway?
Well, in point of fact, I am writing it anyhow, right? I mean, the stuff that I'm sharing is on my blog, and, I write a bunch of articles about content strategy for authors, what that is, why it's important, how to plan that, how to execute that. And that's what this book will be about. It'll be about sort of general help for any author, usually nonfiction, though it's not meant to be exclusionary, and just helping authors think about their content strategy. And the thing that's sort of interesting about the project, and we'll see if it works or not, is that it's kind of two projects, right? So I'm writing all this content that is the book itself. It's sort of the blog as first draft. But then I'm also writing the meta content, the sort of, here's how I think about structuring this and sort of showing the process. And you'll see on the site, if you go to glassboxproject.com, you'll see it's sort of done in two columns. One is the book content, and the other is the meta content.
So even for because as you mentioned, a lot of your content is primarily going to be of interest to nonfiction people, but by doing it under glass, fiction people, some of the content will be of interest, but definitely, this is how I made a book. Anybody that wants to make a book, this is going to be useful to them.
Yeah, they could. I mean, there are some issues that are specific to nonfiction authors. I mean, the reason I focus on that is because, one, just because that was the content that I was working with my whole career, but also, I spent about 5 years at young startups and sort of learned the entrepreneurial side of the business too. And the thing that, that I wanted to help was help authors sort of think like entrepreneurs. And, so basically I think it sort of leans towards nonfiction. It's not to say there aren't fiction writers who think like that. I mean, I think that any author who's successful today thinks of themselves as an entrepreneur. It's just there are specific issues around nonfiction. And the most obvious is the nonfiction author who wants to use the book to support their core business, either as a marketing funnel, as a credibility engine, as a giveaway or something to sell at events. I mean, it's something that supports a business they already run. So they already think of themselves as entrepreneurs because they are, And my challenge with any of them is to say, look, the book that you're writing is actually a part of your business. And it's funny how some folks will think of it as separate, but really it's supporting your main business. So it is a part of your business.
How much of this project is you experimenting or trying some things out, and how much of it is you've done this before, so you're just doing it again, but now you have an audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. This project's different than anything I've ever done, so certainly I expect it to be a little different, and it's turning out to be that way too. There are some things, let's put it this way, the rules are just changing fast in this realm, right? So one of the things that doesn't change is that you have to produce good content, right? And that's what I've done my whole career, so I know about the writing process, what goes into creating good content, validating that, honing it, making it really good. Because, if you don't start there, then you're not really a part of the conversation. But some of the stuff that's around that is different and changing quickly with how you get found, how you connect with an audience. There's just a lot that's constantly in flux. So, and as I said, I feel like I'm kind of managing two projects, sort of writing the book and then writing this stuff around it. So definitely very different than anything I've done before. So a lot of experimenting, to be sure.
So what is the end game? How long do you expect this to take? And then what happens at the end? Well,
I set this up with a schedule. I wanted to try to be, this is what you do for any author working with any publisher is, you got to try to set an end goal for this. So I had this running about 7 months or so. But really the idea here is that what I feel is that everything that I'm writing, for the most part, the first draft of this book is open on my blog. There might be some pieces missing or whatever, but a blog is a really poor publishing platform for a project of this type, right? The final product, what I hope will be a self-contained, really convenient resource for authors so they can get everything packaged in one, convenient format. And, for me, this is sort of a couple things. One, I feel like if I'm going to advise authors, yes, I've been an editor for a long time in the industry, but I feel like if I'm going to advise self-publishing authors, I should do it myself, and go through the process and learn it firsthand. Be a practitioner, not just a sort of, someone who's espousing theories. And, I just feel like it's sort of for me running my business as an advisor, it also is sort of a marketing funnel or credibility, something that'll help raise my credibility. And, as I've said on my blog, I expect and I hope that a lot of people will get value from this with no transaction between us, right? Where it's a free resource, can help a lot of people. That's why I started this off. But then if you want specific help, that's where you move to, okay, so now you can hire me as a consultant and we'll dig into your specific issues, not just this sort of general help that I offer on the blog and the book.
Well, I think you could not have made a finer transition into the next part of our conversation. So just to catch everybody up, Michael has I guess you call it a consulting business, Control Mouse Media, where you serve as, and you can correct me where I say this wrong, you offer services as an advisor to authors and publishers and entrepreneurs. And if I go to your website, or I have been to your website, those are set up as separate tracks, more or less. Let's start out with, the first question I have is, for these people, when they come to you, are you a consultant or are you a coach?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I do some activities I think of more as coaching, sort of trying to inspire or validate, encourage. There is a lot of that to it because, embarking on a project of this type is, it's a long process. So you need to be encouraged, and you need that help and support in making decisions. But I do a lot of hands-on stuff as well, sort of, actually executing on content strategy, not just sort of designing it. So a little bit of both.
So you have a whole list. You have 3 different lists, actually. These are all of the kind of the suite of things that are offered depending on why I come to you. Mm-hmm. And I'll make sure to link to them because we don't want to go through the whole list now because they're pretty huge. Sure. But I'll link to them for people to find them. But could you give an overview, I guess, of and again. What is it? It's authors and it's publishers and content owners is how you also say it, and entrepreneurs. I guess part of my question is how different are those, and how much of it is the services you offer actually more or less, it has less to do with you offering different things and more about the entry point from their side. Yeah,
from their side. I mean, that's, when I structured this, I always want to do that, and this is a part of something that I would recommend to anyone, whether it's an author, an entrepreneur, or a publisher, right? It's all about your audience. This is not about me. This is about what I can do for you. So if you're an author, you're not going to be interested in the publishing side of my services. You're going to be interested in the stuff that I can do for you. So I tried to structure this so that it's speaking to an audience. And this is not different from any other thing that I would advise an author in constructing his or her business. And so, I guess I would say that content strategy on the whole is a pretty broad topic. So, I mean, for an author, that goes from everything about, constructing your book as the core of your content strategy, to your web presence, your social presence, things that other people contribute, data, about those interactions. I mean, all that stuff says something about you, and that's not different for an entrepreneur. Just sub out book for whatever the product is that you're building. You've still got to connect with an audience, and that's what a content strategy does. And I'm still trying to find the sweet spot of my business. I'm not sure whether it will be authors or entrepreneurs or publishers. I have the sense it'll be probably more authors or entrepreneurs. Just given the clients that I've taken on so far. But yeah, that's, the services are pretty broad. And I think if there's any challenges, it's sort of explaining to folks, why a content strategy is so important, because, this is part of the new rules. You can't just sort of, let's just say this sort of cliche of if you build it, they will come is just not true today. There's just so much stuff that's out there on the web, so much noise. I mean, you are not going to get found. So you have to find ways to do that. And to me, that's all about good content. You connect over content, and you have to have all of the elements of a content strategy working together. But this is new, and it's a little hard to explain to folks who are not familiar with this and just think of marketing as traditional advertising.
It would seem like with a lot of the changes going on in media and publishing that there's going to be some people who come to you as like you're going to be explaining to entrepreneurs you need to be a publisher, you need to be an author, and vice versa. You're a publisher, you need to be making your own content, you need to think like an entrepreneur, and then for the author, you should be published. I mean, is that the case, or am I oversimplifying?
Oh, no doubt. There's a lot of overlap with these categories, right? So I see the same issues. So, for instance, let's take an author or an entrepreneur, right? The same issues that come up over and over again. For instance, the sort of let me put my head down and be very product focused. So build, and then sort of look up and you say, okay, now great, I'm ready to get this product out there. Where's my audience? And, at that point, it's almost, I don't want to say it's too late, but you should have been building your audience into the process from the start. Whether you're building a web product as an entrepreneur or whether you're building a book. I mean, this is kind of what I'm modeling with Glassbox Project too, right? If I'm trying to help authors, I actually want that to be a conversation as I'm writing it. I want them to feel involved and to have some influence over the product. And that's not different from any entrepreneur as well. And I would say the same thing for publishers too. You do it for your audience. And if you just think that you're going to produce a product in a vacuum and shove it out there, and then expect everyone to just come running, it just doesn't work that way.
How early, although you kind of answered this, but how early should an author be considering these types of services? Should I already have my book in progress, or should it be, I think I should write a book?
I think it varies. I mean, obviously, I would say do it early, right? Because if you're in it, if you're doing this project in order to connect with an audience, right, then you need to sort of start building that audience almost before you actually need them, right? And that just goes to the point that, content strategy is more than just the book. So it's about blogging, it's about participating in social, and it's getting, it's actually starting a conversation. So you get something out of it, and so do they. So I think, again, I said I'm trying to sort of find the sweet spot of my business, but I think so far for me, the ideal client is someone who's a first-timer. They haven't been through the process yet, and they don't know where to start, or they've been through the publishing process once or twice, so they kind of know the pitfalls. They know potentially that, it didn't work the first time, the way that their publisher or the way that they handled their marketing. So it's kind of, it's not to say that other folks who have, more experience couldn't benefit from it, but I just feel like those are the folks that I can get to. But I'm also pretty clear up front that if you don't believe in the same things that I do, like if you just think that, you're going to leave everything to your publisher and that's the way that you're going to run your marketing, I mean, if you really strongly believe that, I mean, that works for some authors, but, I'm not really going to be able to help you if that's the case. So, I'll decline to take a client who's not sort of at least in the belief that, hey, look, a content strategy is going to help me. It's going to help me, my audience. It's going to help me build credibility.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. You've mentioned this before, but so you are an advisor, you're a consultant, you're a coach. Could you talk a little bit about what your professional life was that got you here? Yeah,
pretty simple. Like I said, 17 years in publishing. Spent almost all of that producing intro-level textbooks and working with authors pretty much from, finding someone who's the right candidate, the right profile, helping them conceive an idea and then taking it all the way through the process until you have a product that's in line with what the market wants, and then actually going out and marketing it and helping sell it as well. And then beyond that, it's been about, and part of that was, so that was at big publishers, but also at small startups too, where I learned about sort of building something from zero, which is a totally different challenge than, managing a huge list at a large publisher. So I sort of feel like I'd sort of seen it from both sides, from the issues of big and the issues of small.
So in addition to offering now your expertise and your experience I'm trying to think how to say this. I don't just have to come to you as a client. You are also telling the world things that you've learned and giving them ideas through, you have a blog, you have a podcast, you do videos. Let's start out with what led you to pursue multiple media.
Well, my go-to is always writing. It's kind of how I think through things. It's how I work through a problem. I just am constantly writing. It's kind of how I think. But, I wanted to do some experimentation too, just because, for a couple reasons. One, I mean, certain people respond to certain things, and so I might catch other folks with a video or audio. And that I have seen as well, so that's good. That experiment seems to be working. But, the other reason is just, it's the same thing that I would advise authors on. Part of a content strategy is getting found through good content. And so multiple outlets is really good for search, right? You have a lot of content hooks out there so that you have a better chance at getting found. And so that's part of why I do it too.
Are you doing the same messages in all three spaces, or do you find that certain kinds of messages work better in certain media?
That's a great question. It's largely the same sort of info, trying to sort of inspire folks and give them sort of, things that are actually of direct value immediately, something you can put into practice. I mean, I try to stick to that if I can. But the big difference really is that it's in emphasis, right? So for instance, if I feel like I can write a really clear post and get it across in that and publish that on my blog or via social, do something that's, say it's an inspirational message or something that's helpful, whatever, that's great. But suppose that I need sort of like a more emphatic or emotional response to it, or something that a voice, like an audio or video, can really underscore, something that might not come across in print. That's when I'll go to those. When it needs to be a little bit more impassioned, and that's not going to lift off the page, So that's when I'll kind of go to audio or video, when I really need to add a little oomph behind a point.
I think I want to have a little glass box kind of moment here and tell you something that I'm doing, and just in front of God and the world, find out if you think I'm doing it correctly or if I'm an idiot. My idea had been, like, we have articles on the DIY Author website, and I thought, I can read these articles, which gives me audio, and then I create a SlideShare a kind of document, and then I put the audio and the SlideShare together and make a video. So it's 100% or 99% the same content, but I'm putting it in all these different places. When you hear that, do you think, wow, that is a lot of work for not that much benefit? Should they be more different than that? Or do you think, that actually sounds like a pretty good process? No,
that's not bad. And I use that something similar too. Occasionally, I'll record a video and then use the audio. So I'll use a good mic and whatever. I'll actually capture the audio and use that if it's appropriate as a podcast too. And the if it's appropriate is just merely, does it sound good audio alone, or was there something that needed to be, like, was there a visual in the video or something like that? Or sometimes I'll just do a podcast because, I mean, honestly, I'm most comfortable with audio as far as producing this. It's, as a musician as well, audio is comfortable, not just for recording, but the whole process of producing it and editing it and all that. I mean, it's natural to me. Video is kind of new for me. So, I'm a little less comfortable in it. But yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable way to do that. But the thing I think that I would advise you and what I advise authors too is just, you got to be thinking, this is what goes into a content strategy. You got to be thinking, how am I going to use this in the future? So you don't want to think of a blog or a podcast or a set of videos as this ephemeral stream. Push the content out there and it disappears tomorrow or next week or whatever. You want to think of it, how am I going to use that in the future? So every time that I produce something, the idea is that I'm going to use that over and over again. And you can chain sets of content together. So for instance, if I'm talking to a client about building an audience, I can send them a link with, here are 3 posts, including a podcast, about how to do this or the considerations around this. And I want to continually return to those pieces of content because they help me be more efficient, right? Where I can just say, look, I've already said this in what I think is the best way that I can say it. Here's a link to it. And that's the type of thing where I feel like you're building a content empire, not to overstate it, but that is a content strategy, making sure that you're building all this out. It works together. There are ample links so that someone can sort of follow around, so the content's all networked together. And it's easy to access when you need to give it to someone, so that you don't need to constantly explain this stuff over and over again. Just send them to your best version of that, And
I want to come back to something that you touched on, because I already wanted to make this clear to people. You are a musician, and that really fun music that you have in your podcast and your videos, you did it yourself, right? That's your music? So when I'm looking at your musician page, are all of these names you in different forms?
Yes.
Like I'm looking at, I guess, Mobile Sound Lab. Is that the name of an identity of yours?
Yeah, we're just, I guess, a project.
Okay.
Yeah, all of those are me, all those original music. And it's, it's worth bringing that up just because, my publishing background leads me to be very cautious and conservative when it comes to using other people's works. Where you can, you want to use all original work wherever you can. You just don't want complications from that. And I use, you'll see some of the images that I use. I'm not a super visual person, but some of the images that I use are openly licensed things that other photographers have taken or whatever, and I always credit them and always have their permission. But you got to be careful about that. You don't want to step on anyone's toes or open up something where, if it's valuable enough to use, then it's valuable enough to pay the artist for. And so, the best way for me to do that is to just make sure it's all 100% original, or at least as close to that as possible. And where it's not, give people the credit that they deserve and in the way that they want that credit given.
Circling back around the three kinds of streams. You do the audio, you do the video, you have the blogs. You mentioned part of that has to do with being discovered. So do you find that you are actually talking to three different audiences, or is it you're talking three different ways to a lot of the same people? I'm still kind of experimenting with that. I feel like when I'm recording something, or when I'm writing something, basically I'm trying to think of it as, again, it's not for me, it's for a particular audience. So if I'm talking to authors, I want to try to just talk to authors and not bring entrepreneurs into it. And I think I'm better at that in writing than in the blogs, than in the podcast or in videos. But I feel like, just as long as you're able to sort of bucket these into different categories, which I've been trying to do on my YouTube page, then that's okay. I just feel like you should really try to talk to that audience, because no one wants to be talked to in sort of this general sense where it's like, is this really for me or not? I mean, that's something that's, people are not going to stick around if they don't feel like it's going to be directly valuable. What have you learned artistically but also technically from being a blogger, doing a podcast, doing these videos?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me, the biggest change, and I've been doing this kind of, more seriously over the last few years, is without a doubt is discipline. It's really hard to sort of get into that mindset where you commit to doing this and be really consistent about delivering. I'm producing tons of stuff. Like I said, I'm always writing, and probably about a tenth of it actually, reaches the public. Which I think is probably about the right ratio. Maybe you can be a little bit better about that and get that up to one out of every 5 posts or whatever. But I mean, it's one thing that I advise folks when they're constructing a content strategy too, is you don't want to just be pushing out too much stuff. It's again about the audience. Make sure it's directly valuable to them, that it's providing some value. But here's the thing: if you don't do that regularly and you're not consistent about it, I mean, there's nothing worse, right, than a blog that sort of has gone cold. If it's for your audience and you've started to build up the trust of a constituency, then, you got to kind of keep going with it. And, you got to find what's right for you. Some people, only have the stomach to do it once a month or whatever, because it's not sort of a natural setting for them. To me, I can committed to doing 2 posts of some sort every week, which sometimes feels like a lot if I'm in a little bit of a writer's block, and sometimes it feels like I could be doing 3 times as much. But having that discipline and saying, hey, look, if an audience is depending on me, and maybe that's a little bit strong, but if they're expecting something from me, then I'm going to provide value. I got to deliver that, and I got to be consistent about it. That's how I feel about it.
Well, great. Well, thank you for being with us today. I want to make sure if people want to find you, you are at michaelboezi.com, Boezi. So for people listening, and from there, it looks like I can get to you on Twitter. You've got links here for Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, YouTube, and SoundCloud.
I'm everywhere.
Does that cover it?
Yeah, exactly. And you can get any of those links off my main site, or for authors who are just interested in Glassbox Project, just go to glassboxproject.com, and that goes right to my site too. So just, try to make it real easy for folks to find me and all the stuff that I do.
All right. Well, great. Well, thank you very much, Michael.
Chris, thank you. I enjoyed it.
This has been DIY Author. Please visit us online at DIYauthor.com and be sure to sign up for our email newsletter. If you enjoyed this program, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, do it yourself doesn't have to mean do it alone.